Namaste, welcome to Arthaniti, where we discuss money and money matters to help you in your investing decisions. Today, we are going to discuss a very pertinent topic, that of the GDP numbers that were announced on Friday last week. Now, let me tell you, the numbers are not very promising. What has caused reduction in the GDP growth rate? Which sectors are possibly behind this reduction in the rate? What prospective action can be expected from agencies like RBI and the government, and finally what as investors should we make of these numbers and decide on our investing strategies in such times. This is going to be the topic of today's video, so let us carry on. First, the bombshell. India's GDP growth for the second quarter, July to September quarter of financial year 2025, came in at a jaw-dropping 5.4%, far below the expectations of 6.5% mark. Now, you heard that right. Yes, this is the slowest growth that has been recorded in the last 2 years. Before we hit the panic button, let us just bifurcate, let us just understand what is going on here. To put this 5.4% growth into perspective, let us take a quick trip down the memory lane. For the past 5 to 10 years, India has seen a robust growth rate hovering around the 7 to 8% mark. Now, this current slowdown is a significant dip from those highs, reminiscent of the challenges faced during the global financial crisis of 2008. You might wonder, how does this stack up globally? Well, in spite of the slowdown, India is still outpacing many major economies in the world. China recorded a GDP growth of 4.6% for the similar period. In the US, GDP growth is said to be estimated at 2.8% annually. But there is a huge difference between the Chinese and the US economy and the Indian economy. In spite of all this, we are still amongst the top performing economies in the world. So, what's putting the brakes on the India's growth engine? What is slowing down India's growth? Well, for starters, manufacturing has taken a major hit, growing at just 2.2% this year compared to a whooping 14.4% for the similar period last year. Now, this dramatic slowdown in this sector is a result of a combination of factors: global supply chain disruptions, increase in input cost, increased competition of cheaper imports, especially from China. The second factor could be attributed to the strong global headwinds during this quarter. Unexpected under recovery in China thanks to the various stimulus packages announced by the Chinese government. Heightened geopolitical uncertainties. This quarter also saw a run up to the US general elections, which were held in November this year. The third factor can be domestic challenges that India faced. High food inflation, along with high borrowing cost, squeezed the urban consumption, which makes up a major chunk of our GDP. The fourth factor is attributed to export slowdown. Export growth was at a meager 2.8%, while import actually contracted by 2.9%. Now, what does this show? It shows reduction in global demand as well as domestic consumption. Let's break down how different sectors fared during this quarter. Well, agriculture showed resilience, growing at 3.5% compared to 1.7% last year. Services grew at 7.1%, slightly below the expectations. Construction sector maintained a strong growth of 7.7%, though it was down from previous quarters. Mining contracted by 0.1%, a sharp decline from the 11.1% growth it had seen last year. Inflation has been a thorn in our side. Retail inflation hit a 9-month high of 5.4% for the quarter ended September. This has particularly hit the urban consumers very hard, affecting everything from food prices to housing costs. Rural inflation was even worse, with food inflation reaching 9.08% for that quarter. Now, the million dollar question: what should we expect from the big guns, RBI and the government? Well, as far as RBI is concerned, a December rate cut seems highly unlikely. but we should keep on looking for what happens in February 2025. It is expected that RBI will start easing its stance then. You see, RBI is in a very tight spot, balancing growth concerns with inflation targets. As far as government actions are concerned, expect the government to step up its game in the second half of this fiscal year. By that, what we mean is increased capital expenditure and a push for rural demand. It is also expected that the government would come out with new measures like the PLI scheme to boost manufacturing and attract foreign investments. Let us gaze into the crystal ball a bit. Let us predict possible future scenarios. First would be an optimistic scenario. Say, suppose the global conditions improve. Remember, Donald Trump is going to assume office on 20th January 2025. Say, suppose the wars that have plagued us for the last 2 3 years come to an end, would bring some peace and stability in the geopolitical scenario around the world. Secondly, if the domestic policies hit the mark, we could see our growth bouncing back at 6.5 to 7% levels till the next fiscal year. Secondly, a pessimistic scenario with continued global uncertainties and a stubborn inflation would keep our growth subdued between the 5 to 5.5% range for the next few quarters. Third scenario would be a middle ground, a more realistic scenario where there would be gradual recovery and growth picking up to 6 to 6.5% range by the end of next year, thanks to easing inflation and improved global conditions. So, these are the three possible future scenarios based on the results or the records that have been published last week. I am an optimistic person, so I would go with the optimistic scenario. Lastly, the investor playbook. What should we as investors do in this current scenario? First and foremost, stay calm. Don't panic. Remember, the medium term view of India is still very positive. Secondly, focus on sectors like agriculture, services, constructions, as they have shown good resilience during these tough times. Thirdly, always have a long term view. India's fundamentals are still very strong. Fourth, and the golden rule, diversification is the key. Diversify across sectors, it will help you mitigate your risk. So that's all in this video. I hope this video has helped you understand the reasons behind this drastic slowdown in the GDP growth, possible future scenarios, and how we as investors should respond to this. If you have liked my video, please share, like, and subscribe to my channel for more such informative videos. My aim is to spread financial awareness and investment awareness to help you make right decisions in your investments. Thank you. Goodbye. Stay safe.